Hey everybody, this is Derek Fiedler. Today I'm excited to be sharing a podcast conversation with my very good friend James Kourtides. Now we recorded this conversation and posted it over at his channel, and today I'm going to be sharing a segment of it. Now, and this one is a very special podcast because it's the breaking of the seal, because I start opening up more and more and revealing some of my stories, some of my most profound spiritual moments of my life. James helps me walk through it and breaks it down and gives some comparison and some feedback, compares it with stuff from his life. It's a really great conversation, and all I ask is that you would finish it to the end. And if you can't do that, please reserve some judgment, because I go over a lot of things from my past and kind of start processing through that in preparation for my project that I'm working on. So I'm going to drop the needle over into that podcast. Be sure to go over to James. Be sure to go over to James' channel to listen to the full discussion. And while you're there, be sure to check out some of James' other videos. He has some really great content.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm here with my good friend and my first conversationalist, Derek Fiedler. Good to see you, sir.
Oh, man, it's so good to see you, James.
You're starting a project to start documenting your memoirs from a 10-year bicycle journey.
Yeah, so not 10, it's really two years.
Okay. So recently?
So it took place in 2013, 2014.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, or really 2012 to 2014. That was kind of like the climax of that season of my life, of the coming of age, and to becoming my own man, to becoming my own person with my own beliefs and faith and practices and worldview. So really, it's telling the first quarter of my life, from like when I was born until I was about 24 or 25.
So that was about 10 years ago when that.
Yes, correct. 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so actually September 22nd would be the day that I came home from the years of traveling.
And you went with some friends or a group of people that you're familiar with?
Solo, actually.
Solo,
it started out, the first leg of it was, I was living in Portland. I was living in the city, living the hipster life, retire in your early 20s and move to Portland. I totally did that. And then I kind of got to a point where it was just like, I was ready to go, because the things that people were saying was not the reality of like, we're going to change the world. We're growing organic food. And then you learn 97% of the food that makes its way into Portland that we were eating came from other places. And so it's so I was ready to get out of the concrete jungle. And so I went to the jungle. I went to Costa Rica, and I did that solo, and I ended up not traveling a whole bunch. I ended up getting rooted pretty quickly in a beautiful place, San Isidro. It's in the central part of the country. And I fell in love with the people. I lived on farms. I lived with the local Ticos. I got connected with, New Age community on one side. And then with the local Ticos, I learned Spanish as best as I possibly could. I remember even snapping stick candles in half, putting them in empty tuna cans, and then lighting it. And then I would study Spanish until that half a candle wore all the way down. So that was 6 months. And then I went back to the States. I was going to make a whole bunch of money and go back to Costa Rica and buy land and settle there. But then I was drawn from that by a woman, a very beautiful woman. And we had a very special couple of nights together. We actually did a trip. We took mushrooms and we hiked a volcano, and we went to the top of a volcano at night. And then with a group of other people, we came back, and she ended up leaving to Colorado the next day. And I was like devastated, man. I was like, I found the lady of my dreams. And then she left me. And so I set out to go visit her in Colorado. And I did something I'd always wanted to do, but couldn't when I was in Portland because of my responsibilities. I wanted to go on a bicycle trip. And so I was like, hey, how about this? How about I do both? I'll go chase after this lady And then in doing so, I'll bike from Portland and I'll go all the way to Boulder, Colorado. And that's what got me started on the bicycle part of that journey.
Well, before we get into that, can you talk about what happened on the top of the volcano?
Yeah. So it was late one
share
evening.
about the being recruited by three certain individuals.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what's interesting about that? Okay. So this is the same volcano. It's Volcano Kourtides. It's a very mythical place. And its eruption created Clear Lake, which is the largest and oldest natural lake in California. And that's right. That's my home, Clear Lake. And right in the middle of the lake is this giant volcano. And the cool thing is you can hike to the top of it. They have some trails and some fire roads. It's great to hike during the day, and it's even better to hike at night, especially a few days before the full moon, because just as the sun sets, the moon is already rising in the sky. And so you have just this extended hike time so you can see the sunset, and then you can hike in the night without flashlights. And it's a very mysterious place. There aren't really streams running off it, so like the water just kind of absorbs into the volcano. There's an oak grove, very dark, dense oak grove that you walk through, and then from that you merge, and it's just open. You can see the valley and the whole rest of the hike. There's actually a small, like a 2 or 4 person plane that crashed there, and the plane's still near the top of the volcano. And
what's the volcano called? What was the volcano name?
Kourtides, Konocti. And it has the indigenous people around here, commonly called the Pomo Indians. They have some amazing myths surrounding that too. So the hike itself is you can hike to the top, and then you just have views every which direction. And we're a little bit inland, so like you can even see towards the coast on a very clear day, and you can see all the way to the Central Valley on the other side. So it's a special place. So there's 2 things. One happened at this point of the journey that I've discussed, right before or right after doing like the Costa Rica experience, and then leading up to that next chapter, kind of like that interim period, was this trip where late one evening we did the shrooms and we hiked to the top, a group of us, and particularly with this young woman. And then so I go through this bicycle trip. We ended up going down the coast. I connected with a couple other people at that point, so it became a pack. A group of us went down, and then we went all the way to Baja California, into Mexico, and then 2 of us we just zigzagged Mexico. We saw like 13 or 14 states, and then I went all the way down. I was trying to get back to Costa Rica, but then something happened that led me to buy a plane ticket and return back, and that was the eventual birth of my nephew named Eden. And so when I came home, I did another hike up that volcano. And that time I had done something I had really never done or very, very few times it led up to that, is I took part in marijuana. And in doing that, we did that same thing. It was a night hike. It was a different group of us. And we hiked up this mountain, and at the very top of the mountain, I sat on a rock, and I just looked around. I was like, for some reason, I just feel like I have to sit on this rock. And I did it. I went into lotus position, cross-leg. And as soon as I did, I entered a very deep meditative state. And I mean, maybe other people, yourself, could relate. I already have like a very strong spiritual intuition. Some would say like a noose. And so drugs for me take me to a very, very, very deep level very quickly. And the few times that I've done them, in this case was not just like the others, if not even more. I sat on this rock, and then immediately the 3 peaks, the one I was sitting on, Volcano Kourtides, Boggs Mountain, or Cobb Mountain, you could say, and then St. Helena. and St. Helena is another volcano mountain in the region. So the three main peaks in the Clear Lake Basin, my hometown, they took form, and it was almost like these giant peaks, thousands of feet high in elevation. It was like they started becoming darker and darker, and then something like a glowing figure, kind of like how you see neon, like characters in Tron. It was like that, like these spirits that were twice the size of these peaks were laying down or somehow at the level of the peaks. And then when they stood up, they stood twice as high as these mountains. And one was in a green outline, one was in a purple, and one was in a red. And all three of them, and the one that I was sitting on kind of like emerged, through me almost. And then they approached me, and it's almost like they made a trade with me. And they said, if you keep smoking this marijuana, if you keep doing this, we will exchange. And if you do this, we will give you powers like you've never had and never experienced before. Women will not be able to resist you, and you will have whoever you want. And any of your sexual imperfections will be perfected, and you will be irresistible.
Oh, wow. And
so then they gave me a taste. And so it was, man, hope I don't freak out your readers here, but so it was almost like this, they took form, but they weren't limited to going through material things. And so it was almost like one of them took their hand and they reached up below the surface of the ground and then into my abdomen area, and they released something. And it was like kind of like I had gotten to that point where I could see outside of myself, like a bird's eye view. Like if it's something, like if I stood like 15 feet behind myself and looked down, I could see this scene taking place. And it's like they released something that was warming, at the very core of my body, of my being. And it was like they imparted something, not a full something, but like a taste of it. And it was warming. It felt healing. It felt blissful. It felt ecstatic, it felt orgasmic, I guess you could say. And so that was all taking place. And finally, my friends were like, man, they're all chatting, and kind of like roaming around the peak. You can walk to this side, see the view over here on the north. You can walk to that side, see the view of the lake. And then, of course, you have the stars above you. It's at night. And it's just, so they finally come there like, Derek, we have to go. I don't know what's happening to you, where you're at, but we have to go get off this mountain. And so reluctantly, I finally did. And sure enough, I get down and everything they promised me started happening. And it was like the women around me that I was kind of shy around, or like maybe just had like a crush or an attraction, suddenly that they just couldn't keep their hands off me.
Wow. Yeah.
So maybe I'll just stop there. I'll stop there.
So, wow, that's a hell of a story. So what was your takeaway from that? Like, was it memorable, the details of it? And as that started happening, a pattern with the women, you were like, wow, you were connecting it right away, or did it take some time to reflect on, oh, wow, what was it like?
It didn't take long. I'm kind of cutting to like near the climax of this story, at least the part that I'm going to be writing about with this mystical memoir. It's because at the same time, like, so this is a tell-all book. I'm hoping that in telling like kind of the deepest, darkest secrets of my journey, that will help people in theirs kind of navigate life and the meaning crisis and everything that's around them and that's at hand. So the people that I traveled with, we were at a trim scene, because around here, that's a really quick way to make a lot of cash. And at the time, I thought I was going to continue traveling down to South America, and I wanted to load up as much cash as I could so I didn't have to stop and work. And so I was like trimming by my day or during the week. And then I was going to my family's church at the weekend. And so at the same time, I was like reading the Bible and like genuinely exploring that, or going down that path of curiosity. Because up to that point, I had just rejected it and said, oh, that's, the faith of my fathers, and they were blind. That's a shallow spiritual experience. They limited themselves, and I'm going to find the real truth. And that was the quest I was on for many years. And so I'm kind of getting to the head where it's like, I have my grandpa, who was the preacher and the pastor of the church I was going to on the weekends. And then I had like a trim scene and all of the different travelers from everywhere around the world, getting high, doing various forms of drugs, and having these discussions all day. We would listen to Alan Watts, we would listen to music, we would talk about, it was a great community of camaraderie. It was amazing. So in that context, I started connecting with one of the ladies there, and it was just like all of these, I guess you could say dreams were coming true, or desires. It's like all of these desires of, being desired were coming true. But then at the same time, it was like I finally had a wake-up call where it was like, oh my goodness, all of these things my grandpa was talking about, it wasn't just like things that pastors like to talk about from the Bible, or like, spiritual warfare, or like end times theology or anything. You can talk about those things, but it was like, it suddenly struck me, like within a few days after that happening, I was like, oh my goodness, that was real. That just happened. Things have changed. And it's not just me, it's the people around me. And it hit me. And it was just like, because of my grandpa, because of that background, I had a language for it. I understood at least a certain level of understanding. And I finally, it hit me. I was like, I was just approached by 3 succubi who were willing to give me sexual powers to worship them. And it was tied together with this marijuana. And I'm if I'm going to go down this path, I'm going to be worshiping goddesses. And I don't know, it just like finally the fear of it all, or something, like it finally hit me. And I was like, I walked away, and it's just like, I can't do that. Like, I'm losing power. And it was like the Holy Spirit of God was like leading me through that time. And it was like this powerful thing happening over here, and like the new age Rastafari, marijuana, goddess worship world. It was like it created this shock that then awakened this other Christian spiritual life that I had. And it was at that point that I had come back to Christianity. Well, I came back to Christ in the purest, truest, most enrapturing way possible.
So prior to that, were you thinking Christ is just like another ascended master? He's another Buddha. He's a spiritual, spiritual master, just like these other ones, right? We can choose who
precisely
to follow, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you say like, can I remember these things vividly? Absolutely vividly. Like as soon as you say it, I'm there in that scene. Well, we were in southern Mexico, and we decided the guest that we were staying with invited us to a meditation session. And the picture on the wall in that meditative space was a picture of 4 people. One was Krishna, one was Ramakrishna, one was the Buddha, and then one was Christ. And the person that was leading it then later explained, they said, these are all incarnations of the divine. And Christ we consider him one of them. So that was common throughout. That was, that's how we frame things. Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting that this all happened at the age of 24, 25, right? There's this psychologist, I forgot who it was, pretty popular one, that talks about this messianic age that we go through. There's messianic stage, and most men get stuck in this messianic stage, and they want to change the world, right? And they get kind of stuck in this stage, and they spend the rest of their life trying to change the world by, activism and whatnot. Right. So you need to graduate past that messianic stage, which is an immature, masculine stage. And it seems that's funny that you mentioned, we're going to change the world. And I just saw how kind of empty that was. And that was the impetus for this journey. Yeah. Where you were tempted, tempted with, at least in this sense, sexual, kind of to be sexual desirous, so it's like, and you're on a mountain while you're being tempted, right? It's a pattern, it's a fundamental pattern, I think. And it's interesting. So what happened?
So who said that you said the messianic age?
Messianic stage. So
Oh,
you
a
go through
stage.
stages, and then the messianic one is where oh, the system's corrupt, the world is terrible, I'm going to change it. Peterson talks
That's
about it. He
funny.
references is it Piaget? No, I forgot which psychological, but if you Google
Okay.
messianic
I think
stage, yeah,
that's
you'll
good enough.
find
I'm
it.
going to look into it because
Yeah.
it's funny you say that. So I have my some of my old journals from 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see like,
Oh yeah,
right.
99%.
So
You
this
get the
is totally like, so this is what I'd pack it up. I'd show you. So tortilla bags are the best. You get like these really nice bags and become a waterproof case for these.
mm-hmm.
And so you pack it in your bags and you pack it on the bike, but you end up with
Mm-hmm.
tons of tortilla bag wrapped journals. But anyway, this kind of like interesting snapshot where it's like you see like these it's bicycle activism. So I thought like
Mm-hmm.
we changed the world through bicycles. Everybody would ride bikes. They'd use it for bicycle machines for transportation. And it was kind of tied together with, as you can see, some neo-Marxist activism and some other
Mm-hmm.
figures.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
I was definitely caught up in all of that. When I lived in Portland, that was the Occupy Wall Street movement. And I had
mm-hmm.
friends that were living there. And, I'd ride my bike through downtown and see all the different encampments and things. So like the spirit of that was definitely, I was caught up in a lot of it. Not deeply, but enough to where it was like it affected how I spoke, or, I really wanted to be considered cool. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the type of things that you do. You put those type of stickers on if you want
Mm-hmm.
to impress certain people in certain crowds.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Have you gone through these writings that you have? Have you gone through them recently?
so up until the end of 2022, so what at this point of our talk, that's a month ago, I never opened a single one of them. And so
Oh
I just
wow.
chronicled everything. Like I remember us taking like, we would take a whole day and just catch up on our journaling. We'd stop riding our bikes, stop traveling, and we just find a good space and we just catalog as much as we could. And then once we got home, I just stored them and never cracked them open for years and years.
Hmm.
I went on a retreat to a local monastery here, and I did a little bit of write up for people that are interested on my Substack, giving some of the big takeaways from that. And one of them was that I entered the cell and I named this entry called climbing up the mountain. And so it's a monastery on a mountain, and of course they have these small cells with, it looks like a very small college dorm, right, with like a little bed and a little desk and a little sink. And it was the first time where I took like half a day and I just opened and read through as many of them as possible. And that's really where I came down that mountain with confirmation that this is the year, this is the time to write this book. Because really, James, it's like since our discussion and since entering into the meaning crisis and Jordan Peterson, Peugeot, some of the things we talked about earlier, I didn't have the right frame to be able to tell this story. I didn't have the worldview. And now I've spent the last 3 or 4 years really learning the worldview, coming up with a language for being able to tell these stories. And because before I actually, when I came home, I wrote some of them down, but it was through this frame, so it was like, and after writing down a handful of them, it was just like something deep in me was like, this isn't right. Like it's not that these individual stories were bad. I mean, they're entertaining or they're cool, but it's like the worldview is wrong. The ground beneath what I'm trying to build upon isn't ready. And so that's why I'm so grateful for this recent season. And it's kind of a big shift because the last several years and most of the content that I put on the YouTube channel has been more of like philosophy or critiquing or commenting on things, teaching or trying to understand, which is a great work. But it's for me, it was preparatory. It was helping me make sure that I'm bringing people into a life-giving place, a world that is full of meaning and purpose, and it's cohesive. And so that's why I'm so grateful for, symbolism and cosmic Christianity, logocentric or dentrocentric worldview, because now I feel peace about drawing people into, this story, but then, some of the other fiction and music concept records and all these other ideas that I've had for years, decades. I'm excited now because now I get to bring them into something that could transform their life for the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting that the logos was working through you through all your travels, right? But you developed the understanding of what kind of understanding of the logos, like logocentrism. So you can go back now and read through that and kind of find the through line, right? Which is a blessing. It's a blessing. That's valuable journal material that you have there. So that's wonderful. I'm interested to see how that project goes. Are you going to write a book yourself? You could even take those and give them to an editor and have someone that you trust, right? And have them structure it where it's, structure it appropriately. Because unless you have that skill set, you could even use Chat GPT, like develop a structure for these.
That'd be something.
For these, I actually asked Chat GPT, what is the essence of Jonathan Peugeot's symbolism?
Oh,
you want to hear the answer?
I would go for it.
It's kind of funny. Hold on, let me see here. And I asked the follow-up too. So it says, what is the essence of symbolism of Jonathan Peugeot? He says, Jonathan Peugeot is an artist and lecturer known for his work in the field of Christian iconography and symbolism. The essence of the symbolism is to bring forth the spiritual and symbolic meaning of images, objects, and traditions in the Christian faith. He believes that symbols are a means of accessing deeper truths and communicating them to people in a way that is accessible and meaningful. Through this work, Peugeot aims to help people understand and connect with the rich spiritual heritage of Christianity. And then I asked, what does Jonathan mean by symbolism? And he says, by symbolism, Jonathan Peugeot means the use of symbols and images to convey deeper meanings and ideas beyond their literal interpretation. In his work, he explores the ways in which symbols have been used throughout Christian history to express spiritual truths, such as the nature of God, the mysteries of the faith, and the life of Christ. He believes that symbols have the power to evoke a deeper understanding and experience of the divine, and that they can serve as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. In this sense, symbolism is not just about the representation of ideas, but also about the transformation of the viewer through the encounter with the symbol.
Not gonna lie, that's not bad.
Exactly, that's what I thought. I'm like, from a predictive modeling perspective, and what it kind of scrapes from the internet, that's a pretty good, rational distillation.
Yeah.
No,
so I mean, that program is logocentric too.
Yep. There's
it's just conditioned from the meaning makers, but by design, that's what it is.
So so I'm interested. Yeah, it's interesting. I've not paid too much attention to that, so I don't know what,
I mean, it's fun and games right now until it's not. I think
it's world. It's history has been important of not the answers that we get, but the questions that we ask. And with a technology like this, the questions that we ask now are paramount importance. And the tool, we can use it as a tool, right, to help structure this book to make it relevant for these stories, right? It's I had it develop a rap song in Tupac's voice about the philosophy of Jill Deleuze, right? And it did it. It was really good. I did the same thing with Heidegger. I said, write a rap about being in time, and it just spits it out in 10 seconds. Like, okay, this is.
I don't know, James. Have you thought about starting like a side channel where you just
I don't know, maybe actually
produce these cues and questions and seeing what it produces?
Yeah. Again, it's the I asked it. Let me give you one more. I asked it, can men give birth? And here's what it said. Hold on, because there's this whole thing that there's political bias in it. So I'm like, hey, let's see what Chat GPT says. I said, can man give birth? He says, no, it's biologically impossible for a man to give birth. Pregnancy and childbirth are processes that occur in female reproductive systems, and the ability to carry and deliver babies limited to individuals with a uterus and related reproductive anatomy. While some medical advancements have been made in recent years to allow transgender individuals to carry a pregnancy, it remains a complex and challenging process and is not currently possible for individuals who were born male and have not undergone gender transition, that have undergone gender transition surgery. I'm like, Dave, ChatGPT be kicked off Twitter. Look at that,
It certainly would.
So
Wow, great question, James. That is phenomenal.
well,
Wow.
I opened it. Everybody's been telling me about it, and I'm like, I don't want to get into it. But yesterday, for some reason, I like you can just you set up an account, and it just brings the search box, and it's
Yeah.
you know, it's not limited at all. You can ask questions and follow up questions, almost conversational. And I'm trying to think of like I asked it, what's the meaning of meeting? You know, but it didn't give
Yeah.
it gave like a standard answer of significance.
Or what's the
And
definition of word?
yeah, yeah. What is the essence of the Orthodox faith? I asked it that, and you know, I asked
Yeah.
it, what's the essence of Saint Maximus the Confessor's work?
Wow. You know, James, definitely start a side channel separate from
Yeah,
this one that you
right.
have, because I don't want YouTube to shut your main channel down because
Yeah,
of whatever this chat program is
yeah.
explaining.
Hey, it's not me. It's the chatbot. But anyways,
Yeah,
let's not get off track here.
that was a
Um,
pleasant tangent. But
yeah, yeah.
so your original question was, oh, should I use some of these other means, whether it's a human editor or chat? Yeah, so like, okay, so like here's another journal, right? You can kind of see like, I don't know. It's okay. People can't read that because most people can't read cursive anymore these days, at least not in California.
Oh, so you're writing in cursive, huh?
Yeah. And so the answer would be no. Like I already know the answer to that. Because like I said, when I was writing it in that moment, like I tried blogging and it didn't work because it took me out of the present moment. That's why I can't do, like, even to this day, like I can't do news or like breaking trends or document my day-to-day life, because it kind of takes me into another thought space. It takes me into another place of being where like I go throughout my day and I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I start thinking about the post and the reaction to the post rather than actually the thing that I'm doing. 10 years later, I still haven't overcome that. So I just said, well, I'm just going to journal a whole bunch and then maybe one day I'll write a story. So that's just how I do things. Where I like to think in long term. You know, I'm writing this for my great grandkids, my progeny, as well as patrons too, people that care deeply about what I'm doing. So to answer your question, if I were to give all of these, you know, journals and everything to an editor, I wouldn't read the book that they were able to put together, because during the time of writing, I was under the thread or the focus of an incoherent worldview. It was all over the place, because I was high in openness and exploration. And I mean, it's just like, I was willing to try anything. Not to say I still had a conservative side. It's kind of my nature, personality wise. Like I had the opportunity to try ayahuasca. I didn't have peace about it. So I passed on it. And I just, here's the mountain again. I decided to climb Mount Chiripo in Costa Rica. And then again, that was an overnight. You start at like 9 or 10 at night, and then you try to get to the top by sunrise. So I decided to do more of those things than ayahuasca. And my friends that did it, they described it to me, and I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. It involved a lot of vomiting.
Yeah, purging. If you're had that experience for marijuana, which is very akin to experience you'll have on ayahuasca, it'll probably be hyper vivid, where you might not be able to take away too much, because if you're open like that, it's like, you know, you won't be able to make sense of it. Like, you know,
precisely. And it's so helpful that you say it that way, because looking back, the handful of times that I've done, you know, even what people would consider recreative drugs, I only needed a fraction of what they needed, and I was immediately immersed in the spiritual realm. You know, I look at the stars and I could see all of them connected. I could see the stars in the sea. I could see the sea connecting with, it was just like everything was connected, right? As people describe. It took me a trace amount to get to that place compared to my other friends. There were several times where we would all, you know, take the same portion, and some wouldn't affect them at all, or would wear off very shortly. And I would just spend the whole night into the next day just in the spiritual realm. That's just, I don't know, that's who I am. So you're right. Maybe that was the right call to pass on that and climb the mountain instead.
Yeah. for sure. Yeah, I like that.
So, and then of course, with, I don't know, after your examples, I'd be curious to see if I were to submit all of these, journal entries over those couple of years to see what type of story they would write.
Mm-hmm.
But more so, I'm enjoying the process right now, because like right now I'm outlining and I'm researching,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm reflecting, and it's been a very fruitful season to do that. Like I chronicle a lot. I write a lot of things down. I take a lot of notes, but I'm afraid to look at them, because it's like looking at yourself in the mirror for an extended period of time. Or worse yet, like I realized that I have like a growing resentment towards my past self.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's that my past self is the person I hate the most or most critical about. And so there's a whole inner healing spiritual process with just being able to look at myself in the past without being so upset, so
Mm-hmm.
riled up. I'm like, oh, it's like having a sibling that just can't get their act together or something, but even
Mm-hmm.
worse.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you ever experience that when you go to reflect?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. It comes to mind, Terrence McKenna would say, your ego is not your amigo, brother. Like,
Yeah,
and the whole,
that's it.
finding your higher self, and the whole, kill your ego and whatnot. I think it's an important distinction to say we're not to kill our ego, we're to transfigure it. Right. And in that process of transfiguring your past, you're going to have to purge and come to terms with who you were, in a sense. But that's a beautiful process, and I think it's even the negative emotion that comes up, that's part of it, I think. So I would keep going with that. I find myself, because I've done some very terrible things, and I reflect on them in terms of how I treated people and what I allowed myself, groups that I allowed myself to get intertwined with. So I'm most glad I didn't have the wherewithal to write back then. But as we were saying before, I've been going through my notes from the last probably,
there we go.
Probably last since 2016, actually. And I'm reluctant to read this stuff. I'm reluctant to look through it. Like I just told you what I looked through here.
Yeah.
Like,
No, what do you got? You give us a little bit of a taste, a little snapshot.
Oh, geez. I don't know if I can do that.
It's hard.
Here's one that says, my future. I'm nervous and fearful of diving into the venture head first. I know it can be successful, but I'm apprehensive because of the strain it put on us. The most important thing to me, this world, is my family, specifically my wife and my son. I'm afraid to fail them. Like, so it's like I haven't looked through this one in ever, actually. So I'm glad that you brought this up this time. But it's hard to reflect on. I'm with you. It's hard to go back and look, because when you're in a place of spiritual delusion, right, with spiritual prelest, place where you feel you're being so spiritual, but you're actually inflated your spiritual ego's inflated. You feel like you're helping the world and helping others and want to help others heal themselves. But when you reflect back and look at the words that you're looking, you're hyper focused on yourself. Like,
yeah.
And I still get that a lot, where I'll become hyper focused on myself, and like just self-critical thought loops. And then you're kind of getting out of that. I'll just tell myself to be for others, focus on others. If you're going to a place where you don't feel confident or you feel self-conscious, then focus on them. And
100%.
But then it'll come back, and then you gotta, you kind of keep playing that out. But
just start serving. Find a simple place to serve.
Yeah. Even finding someone and going and having lunch with them, even if you're, just going and doing in that with no reason or no point, even if you don't feel like it, because you'll feel so much better there and after, rather than, I'm just going to stay in my cell and kind of sulk a bit and let these negative emotions and attack me until they're gone. And then, it kind of seems a cycle that I've experienced as well.
James, there's a lot to talk about, but I'm thinking maybe we should just keep going on this like psychedelic topic. Yeah. Because for example, there's one more story I wanted to tell you and get your feedback on. One was so in Mexico, in the middle of Mexico, we did a few side trips where we parked the bicycle and we got on a bus and we went and did other things. One of those was we went to Huautla de Jimenez. You've ever heard of that place? It's the birthplace of psilocybin mushrooms. So it was discovered earlier in the 1900s. And it was a big part of leading up to the sexual revolution and everything that took place in the 1960s and 70s. So once it was discovered, it was the place where psychedelic mushrooms bloomed out of the ground, out of the earth.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
again
that.
In a mountainous region, Sierra Negra, the Black Mountains of Mexico, heart of Mexico. And so Maria Sabina was the guide for many people that would go there. And it wasn't just like, here you go, here's a bunch of shrooms and go have a happy time. They had actually developed a whole like spiritual structure, or religious ceremonies. And they considered the mushrooms medicine, and they had a whole different viewpoint of approaching it. And so Alan Watts and Timothy Leary and Bob Dylan, and the list goes on about all of these very influential people back here in the States. They made pilgrimages, you could call it, to this place in Mexico, in Oaxaca.
The Beatles did as well, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we decided to go, and we hopped on a bus. We went to the, deep into the mountains. And a friend of mine, of ours, that we met down in the valley, she connected us with a Sabina, elderly wise woman. But there was a lot of things happening. One was, that was the last time I ever did that. And I knew it would be my last time. And it was interesting because the day before, we were going through one of the small villages. We were talking with people in Spanish, and I realized that their Spanish was horrible, worse than mine. And it hit me that it was their second or third language. And so they're native speakers. So it was like very interesting place. We came across a group of young men, boys, and they just had these mushrooms in their pocket, and they offered it to us. They're like, hey, we'll sell you these mushrooms for this amount. And we told them no, because even then when we were like really deep into, studying Vedanta and Hindu religion and spiritual practices, gurus, especially Ramakrishna. And we were like, I had like a lot of influence from Zen Buddhism as well. And like, we're just exploring all of these, anything except Christianity. Right. And even then we said no, because it was like, we realized it wasn't just like the material or the chemicals that's in the mushroom we're after, and the experience. We wanted the religious component as well. We wanted the ritual. We wanted the Sabina. We wanted the wise woman. We wanted to be guided along this trip. We wanted all of those practices and forms and rituals to be a part of it. So I don't know why. Like, we desired that so much to where we were able to, reject something that came at a much lower price that would get us to that, that had to possess the same chemicals as, potentially the same mushrooms that would get us to that place. But we said no, and paid way more money to do the whole ritual practice package,
So how did that go when you did that, the ritual package there? Was it?
I'll just say this. Whenever this is a new James. This is why I reached out to you, because you're a friend that I trust, conversation partner. But I'm kind of stepping out. Like, I've really never talked about this stuff in detail. Barely even in person. My wife doesn't know some of these stories. I have I have some good things to say about things like these, and I also have a lot of bad things to say about, and a lot of cautionary things to say. Most of these type of experiences were dangerous. They're absolutely dangerous. This one, I'll say this. So the experience was, we went into the basement of a very humble house, made out of adobe, and had a tin shed roof on top of it. It was a very simple home. And we go down to the lowest level of that home, earth walls all around us. It was very dark. It was at night. They wrapped the mushrooms in these, it was a particular type of leaf, a very large green leaf. And then we're guided. And the interesting thing about the guide is that she was saying prayers to St. Peter and St. Paul. And that confused me a lot in that moment. Keep in mind that like I had a Christian upbringing. And I had a mix of emotions because I was very upset that she would dare to mingle in Christianity with what's supposed to be this like distinct, not Christian experience with mushroom medicine. And then so she was just like saying all of these different prayers. And then I found out that it was during a time of colonialism when people genuinely accepted the Catholic faith, but then some of it was forced, and so some people accepted it and was just immersed themselves into the Catholic Christian faith, and others they kind of like made it work for what they had. And so in this case, I forget what it was exactly, but Paul represented the wind and Peter represented the fire, or something to that effect. And then one saint represented the thunderclouds and the rain. And then, so like, they kind of had these like placeholders. And so on the surface, it was like, oh, they're being good Catholics. They're saying what they need to, but really it was a cover up, and they still were able to maintain some of their older practices as well. So then the remnants of my old Christian self were then angry because they weren't really praying to Peter, they were praying to the rain clouds or something. So it was very mixed. And then we entered into that deep state. And again, I went way deep, and that was hard because my ego, it challenged my ego. And it was like, not in a way that was good. It made my ego worse. And so it was telling me what I wanted to hear. It was like, at that time, it started a split. Like I wanted to leave my traveling partner, and I started hating my traveling partner. I started conniving a way to like basically ditch him and start writing by myself. And if you knew him, he's one of the sweetest, most heartfelt men you'd ever meet. It's like, why would you do that to Steve? Steve's awesome. Steve's a sweet man. And so it started like kind of like drilling a wedge. And then, so I felt remorseful for that, but yet I felt like it was kind of stoking that fire. But then it was also creating like these dark dreams, and it wasn't pleasant. It was like, it was a mix. It was like, it was showing me things that I needed to heal from, but not making it better, if that makes sense. And then to make matters worse, our Sabina, I entered, that's this poor woman. I entered into this state, and I could have stayed there for who knows how long. She grew tired. The night was waning, and it was very late into the evening. And so they had to move us. We had to leave. So they kicked us out. And I was so upset. I was like, how dare you? We paid you good money, and now you're kicking us out. We have to go finish this trip somewhere else. And we have to buy rent a taxi and go back to where we were staying. And it was just like, I was infuriated. And it was like, I had all these ideals, all of these stories that we listened to, Alan Watts talk about, and all of the history, this build up to, this place, the birthplace of mushrooms. And it was very different, like, oh, the Sabina, like this wise woman and this guided, and it's the real deal, it's the real experience. And then she's like, young man, I'm growing tired. And then so
I got a 10 o'clock. I got a 10 o'clock you're running up into here. So I need you to keep it moving. Schedule.
It was like a therapist.
That's funny. Yeah. I had similar experiences with doing psilocybin mushrooms, and then having, dark dreams and light dreams, and I had them for a while, and I would write them down for a few years. I have a journal of dreams, which are, some of them are horrific. When lots of death dreams, being killed, being chased, being in cosmic like warfare, just many of them. And I thought I was doing the right thing and writing these down and exploring them. But now I realize that that's not what dreams are about. Dreams should be prophetic, and they are access to the spiritual world, but there's so much distortion that it's better to follow the church fathers and like, don't pay attention to them. If there's something that comes through that needs to really capture your attention, that's one thing, but the vast majority are, it's things that we can't really understand and that are going to stoke our ego, just like I've had that experience as well. But when you're having the experience, you're not thinking, oh, my ego is being inflated here. It's only when you can reflect back on it. Oh, wow, I was made kind of more of a jerk, the whole kind of ego death thing. But I think they're all valuable experiences for sure.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. One is like, would I be here today? Would I have arrived where I arrived had those not been a part of the journey? Of course, that's the unanswerable question. But then also, would I suggest people go out and do them? Here's the positive takeaway from that last experience with the Sabina in Huautla de Jimenez, is that I walked away with a knowing that I would never do that again, because I would find something better. I would find something better. I would find at that time I thought it'd be like a meditative practice or something that would allow me to get to that place again, that very deep spiritual place, and engage in that realm without needing the substance. And so it kind of had this like graduating feeling. And so really, whenever I was in that trim scene, like I went up to that point, majority of my adult life, my whole life, being surrounded by pot. I live in Northern California, Emerald Triangle, all of that. It's a very real part of our economy around here for good and for the bad. But that was kind of like the one thing I'd never really never given into. And so kind of fast forwarding to the story that I told on top of Volcano Kourtides, where I smoked it for really one of the first times. Gosh, I can think like in less than one hand have I partaken in that. And each time I was approached by demons. I think we reached the point in the podcast. I just start saying it for what it is. Although I want to be respectful about that too. But
spiritual entities.
Very dangerous spiritual entities.
Malevolent every ones.
Time. Yeah. To where I was playing with fire, man. I was playing with spiritual fire, and not in a good way. And so I look back now, that I can have the perspective of 10 years of knowledge and learning and practice and all of that, to where I can look back and see it and be like, thank God. Thank the Lord for the grace, the grace of guiding it through. And really, I think the thing that amazes me most is that regardless of all of these, experiences and exploration and experiments, using all these different substances and pursuing all of these things, it didn't come as a turnoff to the Spirit of God. I can't look, and even some of the journal posts, I can see it coming through the words. Whereas like I even knew a little bit back then, way deep down, that I was trying to scare God away. I was trying to scare the Christian God away. And maybe there's times where there'd be distance, but never separation. There was a point where I just knew that his love was not going to be something that I could run away from. There was a point in my journey, my bicycle journey, where on the surface, people would say, wow, it's so adventurous. It's so thrilling. Some of the pictures you're sharing and the stories you're writing about is just like amazing. And true. And it was, but like, there was also like this deep down, there's a spiritual journey happening, kind of like the subcurrent, the layer. And on that journey, there was a lot of that was driven by two things. One was fear, the fear of being wrong, the fear of my dad and my grandpa, the Christian people in my life being right. There's a fear that the God of my fathers was true and loving and better than anything else that I could experiment with or explore. But then at the same time, even though, even in my subconscious, I was trying to neglect it, is that I was being drawn to find out if it was true or not. And so through all of these experiences, it was like kind of like that verse that says, you can take all things and turn it together for good to those who are called, who love God and are called to his purpose. And it might sound crazy, but even all of these like psilocybin mushroom, very potent marijuana experiences, and then even exploring Hinduism and Buddhism and, you know, native spiritualism and all of these different things, they all had a way of accidentally pushing me towards Christ.
Yeah.
In a really interesting way. And so that's why I'm kind of I had peace about setting out and telling these stories. And I do ask that when the stories are out there, that whoever starts them would finish them, because if someone were to start the book and then finish it halfway, it would be damaging to, you know, not just how they see me, or really it would be more like damaging of how they understand the true meaning, the through line of why I'm telling the details and organizing these facts in the way that they are. But really the amazing thing is that I was led into this place where I came to Christ in a way where all of these things created a momentum that helped push past all of these past blinders, these misrepresentations, these hurt wounds about the church and Christianity and my relationship with God. It was like it gave me a taste for that spiritual bliss, and it gave me a longing for inner peace. It gave me a desire to be able to engage with this realm steadily, and without having to be codependent on other substances. And so whenever you'd love it. So whenever, I don't know if you experience this too, but shortly after that trim scene and the experience of being offered sexual powers by succubi on the top of a mountain by these glowing goddesses, that all of those things, like just the craziest of craziest parts of my journey, right after that is in my early prayer meditative times with, you know, like Palo Santo incense and candles and, you know, sitting lotus position. And I'm like giving myself to God in like a totally like not a typical way you'd expect, you know, in a very not Christian form. It was good enough. And so I approached Christ as my guru. I used all of like foreign terminology, right? But it was good enough. And I opened myself and I said, okay, I have this momentum of openness. And I finally came to a point where I'm like, okay, I'll give you the same chance that I gave all these other things. You know, I'll open myself up to seeing if there's spiritual bliss or truth or any of things, just to see what happens. So Jesus, you're my teacher, you're my guru. Show yourself. And in a split second, I entered into the deepest, most profound spiritual state I had ever experienced to that point. And the amazing thing is that it didn't go away. It didn't go away. And so each time I was just like, it created a hunger and a thirst for prayer. And it wasn't like immediately I was like, everything else is wrong and this is it. It was like I tasted of that goodness. I was drawn by beauty to that goodness, and it tasted so good and it was so nourishing and filling that the desire for other things slowly faded away. And it was very, you know, sensational and centered around feelings and experience. It was experiential. It was participative. And I stayed in that state for a long time, but well, I'm kind of getting into the next season of my life, but
well, let's have a couple of these conversations, right? Because as you explore those journals, I'd love to have, you know, kind of maybe drill in a little bit and have a conversation about some experiences and reflect on them together. If you're up for it, I think that'd be.
I'm open for it. Absolutely.
I think something happened in 2012, the whole end of the world thing,
Yes, that's a part of it.
Something happened
Yes,
where
we
a
were in
world.
San Diego,
Mhm,
and we got like the spirit of giddiness, and we started
mhm.
doing cartwheels in a park on a lawn. We just stopped our bikes and we started doing cartwheels and started just being at like goofy children. And that
On
was
that, like the
that
December
Mayan calendar
21st,
day thing. Yes.
I think something happened, seriously. And, Peugeot talks about the re-enchantment of the world. The materialist worldview died in 2012, right? The structures that protected from the spiritual world, for better or for worse, have come down rapidly. And now we're seeing all of this, the spiritual world coming back into the material world, for better and for worse. And people
Yes.
are falling into prelest and spiritual delusion, the new age and whatnot. And hopefully with God's grace, you can get through and find the logos. But I do believe the world ended, the world as we knew it, and we're in this like liminal space between two worlds. So I think when Jonathan talks about things are going to get worse before they get better, a lot more people are going to go through kind of what we've been through, right? In mass. And I think that's going to I think it's going to cause a lot of more turmoil. But I think it's
James,
strange that we're,
did you say 2020 or 2012?
2012. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think
Remember it was December 21st.
I think both are correct, actually.
Yeah.
It's funny,
Yeah.
I heard one and then I thought I heard the other, and now I'm thinking both of those dates are pivotal. And I think you're right. I think my heart in writing this book is to create a map of meaning, like Peterson would say, but more of like a spiritual map of meaning, because my heart goes out to, I think of all of the friends that I met, whether in Costa Rica or all of those places in Mexico and Guatemala, all the places in Portland in the States, all of the people that are caught up in these worlds, and they just have like a strong spiritual desire. And so they reach for this and they seek after that and they learn from this person over here. And it's like, I can just tell them, I can't, like a witness, I can't tell them. Well, the recent years of my life, as like 2016 to now, I have developed a language. I can talk about this and, with a certain aptitude. But in a way, I kind of have both. I have the experiential, where I can just tell them straight up. It's like, I've tried all of these things and you've probably tried more, but nothing is as good as this. There is no peace that others can give you like the peace of Christ can give you. And I can tell you that without a hesitation in my heart. And I can now be able to tell a story that hopefully will say like, oh, I was thinking about doing this, or yeah, I tried that a bunch. And, oh, I had that happen to me, or like, man, if I do that, will that happen to me? Like those are the type of questions that I want people that hear or read these stories to be able to be, inspired by, but also challenged by, but also, guided by, to where it's like, okay, here's a map of, uncharted territory. And because the spiritual world it's like entering into Narnia. It's like entering into, the Lord of the Rings world, where it's like, or any of these games too, where it's like, it is vast. It is vast. It feels limitless. And kind of like what you're saying, like we need guides. We need guides, and we need the right guides. And I'm not promising to be that guide, but I'm hoping to at least come up with some type of map that will help people be able to chart and say, well, at least they have an understanding of, this is my story, and they have a better understanding of some of these things.
Yeah, I think we all have a role to play of being kind of cartographers, right? Those are map makers.
Yes.
Right? Cartographers of the spiritual realms from our perspective, and things will kind of build from there. But yeah, I find it fascinating. I didn't know about any of these writings or what your intentions were, or what's been going on. So I'm glad we were able to connect here. And I think we can leave it here, and until next time. How much have you gone through that material? Have you read through?
Of which one?
Of your material here. How much have you read through? You said you hadn't touched them for 10 years and you've just started looking through them. Have you read through all of them?
So I haven't read through all my journals. So my writing process is pretty unique. I okay, so I wrote a letter called Know Your Seeds, right, on my Substack. And really, I look at my creative process as like receiving ideas or receiving seeds. And then the seeds are the things that tell me what I need to do, how I need to garden this story, how I need to tend to it. And so the way that looks like for me is as I go throughout my day, or if I, sit down in the early mornings before I go to work, it's a sacred time. I write down the ideas as soon as they come. Kind of like you were saying, like the through line. My outlining process is a way of like kind of chiseling one little layer, one detail at a time, to where the through line becomes clear and complete. That's the process I'm in right now. And so whether it's the things I listen to, whether it's the things I'm reading, whether it's the actual material, pictures that I took, or the journals that I write, kind of coming up with the patterns, the consistencies. As I reflect on certain stories, there's certain little tiny details that will emerge. And then hopefully conversations like these with trusted conversation partners. I might even open up and interview people that have similar experiences, or, doing similar work, trying to help people through telling their story, whether it's through journey or through spiritual transformation. And then kind of like allowing those things to dry out. So that's the place I'm in, is I guess you would call it outlining, but I'm kind of like letting the patterns and the details kind of show up. And then I just have a law of always writing every idea down, regardless of the time of day or what I'm doing or how I'm feeling. And I'm getting to a place where I'm seeing patterns in my life that I never even thought to notice. Like, for example, I'll give you one. I never realized that every critical stage of moving from one stage to the next that was involved or I was directly drawn by a female figure. So like I mentioned, this special young woman that drew me to Colorado. But whether it was my grandma, whether it was a young woman very special young woman in Guadalajara in Mexico, whether it was even my wife drawing me to the subtle life, whether it was, it's like every single stage, I look back and I reflect, and I'm like, there was a woman that was involved in that process, drawing me to the next thing.
Interesting.
Not all of them are romantic, right? Yeah. Even some of them spiritual, like the succubi. That was drawing me to another path.
Yeah.
Right before my most critical moment, right, of transformation.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a blessing. It's an exciting project. I can see the excitement coming through. That you have to work on this. I see you write down your ideas, and it's almost like a pruning afterwards. So you get the ideas down, and then you prune it down, and then what's left is what's relevant.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm like listing it all out, and I'm kind of listing it out and pruning a little bit, but then the next stage will be pruning it down to like, okay, here's my outline. I kind of do things in passes. So like my outline is like, some of it's one sentence. Other times it's just like more written out. It's almost like a first draft. So like, I don't do things like this. I kind of do little passes here and there. Some of them more finished than the others. So before we go, I wanted to talk to you about books. One thing I love about your channel is that you're faithful with reading passages, talking about books. And so I'm really curious to hear if you had any book suggestions that would be helpful in any of these topics, to kind of be able to compare, my story or the type of book that I'm doing with other works. Like, for example, when I went up to that monastery, they had a book that I'd never seen before. It's called The Gurus, the Young Man, and Elder Paisios. And it's very similar. One man just tells his spiritual journey, and he went to the holy Mount Athos, and he talks about some of the engagement that he had with Elder Paisios, very holy man. But then he also went to India and visited and explored some of the top gurus, like I forget his name, was it Swami? Oh gosh, what was his name? The author of Autobiography of a Yogi. So he went to his ashram, and he went to other people that are considered, incarnations of the divine. And then he went back to Mount Athos. Anyway, it's just like, so like this book, and I'll start doing more videos.
Who's the author?
It's
I'm familiar with
Dionysios Pharasiotis.
Pharasiotis. I don't have that, but I have one that in a similar vein, but I'll have to look. That's interesting.
So this one's, it's like a memoir, an extended memoir, I would call it. I was really encouraged by this one because he's a layman. He's not an author. He's not a professional. And his writing style is it's not sophisticated like you would expect from like, professional author. But it's a page turner.
Yeah.
Like I finished it in a matter of days and drew so much from it. And it was encouraging because it's like, it helped lower the pressure a little bit. It's like, even if I just simply let these stories tell themselves, and it wasn't, like all of these other things that you'd expect and go to writing school to learn, like, oh, make sure that you don't tell, make sure you show, show, don't tell.
Have you read or familiar with Matthew McConaughey's book?
Oh, Green Lights.
Yeah. Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet. It's on my reading list though.
Get it in Audible, because he took his journals over. It's really, really entertaining, and it's really good. And it's spiritual too. So I would suggest that. I have this book that I've been reading through, and a different kind of DMT dialogues, encounters with the spirit molecule. And it's, Dennis McKenna, Jeremy Narby, Eric Davis, but Rick Strassman, who was the one that did the DMT intravenous experiments, writes, and I did a video probably a couple of weeks ago on the DMT and the Hebrew Bible, and he talked about all of the imagery, and it's fascinating. And I just, in one of my notes, I've reflected on the books that started this journey, at least on YouTube, and the one that kind of brought us together was Christ the Eternal Tao, which is interesting.
Yes.
Because it's, again, Christ and the Tao. So it's this connection of kind of the East and the West. And then the ethics of beauty. From there, Life of Moses was big for me. On the Cosmic Mysteries, St. Maximus. And then, I have our first interview here of Derek Fiedler in the logo, 6/11/20, which is right there. And I'm just outlining Marshall McLuhan, Father Seraphim Rose, Orthodox psychotherapy, Nietzsche, Heidegger. So, there's so many different things, but I think from your context and what you're looking at, it's going to be fun exploring and reading others' memoirs and just getting inspired from them. So I look forward to hearing you.
As you say that, so the person who wrote Christ the Eternal Tao, also, did he write the life of Seraphim Rose?
Yeah, it's Hieromonk Damascene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, have you read that one as well?
Oh yeah. It's amazing. I read, it's a huge book. Let's see if I can find it. It's a huge book, and it's his biography, and it's absolutely wonderful. I would I read probably 4 or 5 chapters, and I have a playlist, but it was just too big, and I was coming out of the working from home era where I could read a lot, on YouTube there, but it was hard to get for a while in the pandemic. It's like $400-$500. I think you can pick it up now, but I would suggest that. He talks about he was a student of Alan Watts. He went in, to courses there, and he was a student of Jiming Xing, who was one of these, kind of traditional Chinese medicine. You'll read it. It'll profoundly impact your heart. I highly suggest that, since you're embarking on this journey here. So that's the one out of all of them I would suggest. I can't think of another one that would be, that I would suggest picking up. And it's a thick tome, and it goes from, he was an atheist, and he talked about how, he talks about this one time where he was drinking a lot, and him and his girlfriend at the time, he was so mad at God. He was so angry, and it's in detail. There's a lot of pictures in it of his life, early life, just throughout. There's a lot of pictures of his journey there. And I didn't read the whole thing. I read through probably half, and then other chapters, the end. And, so I didn't get through all of it. But his life and works is absolutely phenomenal.
Wow.
Check that
Awesome.
one out. Couldn't
The other one
endorse
I'm
it as
reading
much.
right now is The Way of the
Yeah.
Pilgrim. And I'm enjoying these type of stories where it's like things that are embedded in, not just travel, but then also like people and their stories.
Mhm.
As I spent a lot of time the last few years just going through like philosophical, very technical, how-to theological type of readings. And I feel like I've loaded up enough there to where it's like I can spend the next year and a half just like actually practicing and living that out. And reading maybe some more books kind of along the lines of just hearing people's lives and stories.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, but it also has me doing a lot of this too, where it's like, you pray, you have a prayer rope, and actually like it's, and maybe I'll write a little bit more about this, but it's there's an era of my life. The end of the book started an era of my life where it was very much a matter of the heart. I was a season for several years. It was just like I was driven by the heart, not so much the feelings part of it. That's part of it, but I mean like the core of things, that stillness, that's the ground of being. So I was operating in that realm, and I kind of turned off, and I maybe even like egotistically said, theology, they're missing it. But then enter University of Davis and introduced to the wonders of theology, the life that comes in knowing God in those type of profound ways. And then anyway, so I spent the season from 2016 to now basically like in the under the leadership of the mind. Very technical knowledge, and then kind of like tyrannizing my heart. And now I've finally come into the season this year where I'm like in this book, which I do recommend. It has a really, really cool epilogue story, little parable at the end. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of,
yeah.
It's Into the Silent Land by Martin Lard.
Yeah, very cool.
And it talks about bringing the mind down into the heart. And so I feel like that's the kind of season I'm in, where I spend maybe a little bit more time in stillness and prayer, rather than trying to figure out all of the inner workings and come up with a language for prayer.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The noose is the heart mind, and in Taoism, there's this
interesting.
The practice that you do is you bring you bring the mind into the heart, right? They call it the shin. It's very similar, the noose. But the idea is the noose has been relegated to logical, calculative thinking. There's this whole other capacity that's atrophied, and it has to do with the heart. So there's not a good English translation for the word noose because it has these two aspects. And once they become, kind of connected again, that's kind of the way towards theosis in a way, something like that. So
is it like intellectual knowledge and spiritual knowledge?
Yeah, something like the spiritual from the heart, right? From an Orthodox perspective, it's the heart that operates. Same thing in the Taoist perspective. It's the heart where kind of everything is the center and radiates from there. And the mind is more of a calculative, in a good sense, a way to intellectually process things. But it's both that are necessary. So I like the season that's, swerving in and out of kind of connecting those two pieces. So it's I think a lifelong journey. So yeah, very cool.
All right, James.
Thank you. It was nice connecting with you. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Well, James, can you just catch me up? What are you going to be doing this year? 2023.
I don't know. I've never really had a project or a projection of kind of what I'm doing. I'm just going to.
I just got to say, I love that about you.
Yeah. Well, it's not on purpose, It's
in
just
my Pentecostal charismatic background, it's like, oh, he's so led of the Spirit.
Yeah. I think maybe I'm just not organized enough, actually.
Well, it could be that too.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'll definitely keep you in the loop and continue this meta conversation. So I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, James. Thanks for the talk.
Yep. Thank you. Be well.
You too.